Good evening. Welcome to Spiritual Warriorship seminars, classes. Welcome back, those who have been coming, and welcome to those who may just be dropping in. We are discussing spiritual warriorship based on spiritual warrior books written by His Holiness Bhaktitirtha Swami. And as I say each time, you can get these books at Krishna.com store. We are presently working on discussing from Spiritual Warrior 4, Conquering the Enemies of the Mind. And we know about that mind if we've been here from the beginning, as we did the 12 qualities of a spiritual warrior, and we dealt with mastering the mind. I just want to remind us, for those who are endeavoring to walk the spiritual warrior path, or any path where you're involved in your spiritual awareness and consciousness. But Bhaktitirtha Swami states that the path of a spiritual warrior is not an easy path. It demands courage, determination, discipline, intense compassion, and unconditional love. Now, we've studied and talked about love, and compassion came up. That's one of the qualities of a spiritual warrior. So if you've been following us along pretty good, none of this will seem unusual to you, and prayerfully you will have had some experiences of applying, because that's what this is about. You're hearing, and as you hear, you apply in your life, you practice what you hear, and you see how change can be made. But he's saying that spiritual warriorship, the path, requires an understanding that this world is not the final chapter, and we are on a mission. So, do you want to join the ranks of Transcendental Army? Everybody raise your hand. Jai! All right, we're there. Okay, those who were here before, last week, we discussed and completed the chapter in Spiritual Warrior 4, Conquering the Enemies of the Mind, and the chapter was entitled Avoiding Excessive Anxiety. I want to ask, do you remember any definition given in that chapter on worry and anxiety? Test time? No, not really. But just sort of challenging your mind if you've been with us. Or do you remember any points that the author gave us on how to avoid anxiety or worry? And I also want to ask, did any of you who have been hearing this or heard this, did you experience any opportunities to apply the technologies? If you care to, you can share it with us in the chat room. But tonight we're going to go into Chapter 3 in Spiritual Warrior 4, Conquering the Enemies of the Mind. Chapter 3 is titled Managing Anger. That word familiar to anybody out there? This whole chapter, I'm going to give you a quite little summary of it. Hopefully it will encourage you. If you have the book, take it down off your shelf, open it up, and go along with us. Or that it'll encourage you to go online, Krishna.com, store, and order it. It's a fantastic book entirely. It covers so many aspects of things that we experience in our life. The author opens this particular chapter with a caution to spiritual seekers, saying that if they don't employ introspection, they may fall back to past bad habits. Now remember, in the first chapter we spoke about introspection, and that was the chapter on what? Avoiding excessive anxiety. Let me just give you a reminder, because it can apply to each one of these aspects. He says we should use this opportunity, what you're hearing about today, anger. Of course, last time it was anxiety, excessive anxiety. Excessive anxiety we were talking about. Remember that. Because there will be some anxiety, but it's how you use it and how you allow it to affect you. He says we should use this opportunity to look at our mind in order to harness it and place it more in the service of the Lord. You understand this? And we've been through this many times in each section we've been. We have to master that mind and not let it run away with us. And we can harness it, and by serving the Lord and serving others. He says first we should look at ourselves to determine the extent. Now this was excessive worry permeates our life, but tonight we'll say first we should look at ourselves to determine the extent that anger permeates our lives. So really look at that. He says this examination will tell us about our level of faith. A sadhu or saintly person is supposed to be faithful with firm determination and very grave and focused. What does this tell us about our own mindset? Okay, so that's introspection. Now we will begin. Oh, another thing about this chapter before I begin. What the author does, he calls upon spiritual warriors, which we are or endeavoring to become. He calls upon spiritual warriors to recognize our consciousness to be the battlefield, and our weapons to be what? Remember, we used to go over that every week, huh? What our weapons are as spiritual warriors, because it's not ordinary weapons we're talking about. Here he's reminding us that our weapons are genuine knowledge, integrity, compassion, and love. And if you've been with us, these qualities come up and we've gone over. In this chapter, the author also gives an analysis of anger, as well as causes and myths. He discusses triggers of anger, the 5 shoulds and the 4 blamers. It's really a practical workbook for you that are hearing this and if you're reading the book. And one thing, as usual, he does not leave us in limbo. But he gives us in this particular chapter 9 positive ways to deal with shoulds and blamers. And he also reminds us that there is healthy as well as unhealthy anger. Now, I hope I've whet your appetite to open your ears, perk up, check your mind, tell it to don't give you any nonsense. Now we're going to work with this. So, chapter 3, he starts first with a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, ancient Vedic scripture. He says, this verse says, a person who desires liberation from this material world should not fall under the control of anger, because when bewildered by anger, one becomes a source of dread for all others. That's clear, right? You know what it's like in a room with an angry person, or you've maybe lost your temper and become angry, and you know it's really a dreadful situation. So we're going to move along here. The first section is called The Pervasiveness of Anger. He states, along with fear and anxiety, we will also see an increase in krodha, or anger, as we enter into the 21st century. All over the planet, rage is accelerating and manifesting as rage, executive rage, sports rage, airplane rage, and especially road rage. I remember one time in D.C. that road rage was going crazy. Somebody would come up close behind you, you know, or next to you, and if you looked at them, they'd pull a gun and point it at you. For a while, we heard quite a bit of that in the headlines. I don't know if any place else. But we know people don't want to be beat to move their car at all. So he's not telling us anything that we don't know about or haven't heard about. Even ordinary people in seemingly modern countries do not feel comfortable due to fear and paranoia, which constantly keeps them attentive and alert. Such negativity will continue to accelerate in the coming decade as the Maya element increases and as seemingly stable support systems fall apart. As people's relationships break down and they fight more in their material and spiritual environments, people will become even more faithless. After spending many years on a spiritual path and not achieving any of the results due to their own improper practices. You hear that? Due to their own. This is saying we must be mindful, not blame others. We must do introspection, see where our mind is and the things that's going on there. Due to their own improper practices, some people will even revert back to past bad habits. Some of you, dear readers and listeners, may even end up this way if you do not act cautiously. So you must be mindful, cautious, and aware of what's going on within your mind and your life each day. He states, therefore, as we embark on this topic, which is managing anger, we should take the time to ask ourselves if we have an anger problem or if we feel unable to deal with anger. How about that? Let's stop a moment. Take time. Just ask yourself and be honest with yourself. Nobody's going to be checking. Ask yourself if you have an anger problem. Or do you feel unable to deal with anger? He states, we might discover that we do in fact have a problem with anger that we simply cannot recognize. He states, as I begin this reflection on anger, I looked at myself in order to see how I handle this emotion. Although I try to think and speak lovingly, I realize that I sometimes have an issue with anger. For those of you who feel that you do not have a problem with anger, you may want to look deeper at the subtle manifestation. I was thinking about when I was reading this and studying this, and I had a realization. It goes back many years, and why not share it? Because I can understand. Sometimes you understand better if you have an experience. Many, many years ago, in my young womanhood, something happened in a relationship, and I became very angry. But that anger led me to want to hurt that person so badly that it frightened me. I didn't know I had that kind of emotion. I didn't realize. And I somehow didn't do what came up in my mind to do, and I won't put that out on the air. There may be children listening. But from that occasion, I decided I would not allow myself to get angry like that anymore. But what I realized in later years, when situations would come up, I would not say I was angry. I would say, oh, that didn't work, try to appease it. And at some point in later years in my life, I really had to work with that I had been angry during the occasions I said I wasn't. So as I said, sometimes when you hear, you're reading and you're hearing, you really have to, as he say, go deeper to make sure that there isn't anything subtle there. Especially if you feel that you do not have a problem with anger. Now he says the symptoms of such a problem may manifest as a lack of forgiveness or even as physical illness. If we constantly carry around such intense frustration, the energy will then affect the body in negative ways. Oh, this is interesting. I'm having another flashback. Another period, not as far back as that first one I described, but I began getting awful pains in my leg and in my back. And I was going to the chiropractor and doing alternative things. But at one point it got really bad, and even the chiropractor said, you may need to go to the doctor, which I did, and then they sent me for x-rays or CAT scans and all. And it came back with a report of something called spinal stenosis. And I was referred to a neurological surgeon. And I went, and he showed me the x-rays and everything, and then he started telling me how surgery could correct what they saw in the x-ray. When he got through describing, I said, no, thank you. But the friend, the devotee who had driven me to the doctor, when I got back in her car, she said, oh, I have a book I got at the library I want you to read. And this book had to deal with, it was by a doctor who in a hospital in New York. And he had another name, on my memory fades, but in reading the book, it had to do with, just as described here, you have to reflect on what's going on in your mind, or if you have some issues. And what he was saying, if you have anger or other concerns with, you can't let it sit there. You let it up and you look at it and let it go. And what happened as I began practicing that was that there were some people that there was some anger at that I wouldn't call it that. Okay? And gradually I kept going through that exercise, and gradually that pain subsided, and I was able to move around more and be less in pain. So now I'm realizing as I'm reading this, again, an experience I had that. So we have to be careful. If we constantly carry around such intense frustration, anger, that energy will affect the body in negative ways. So sometimes we have to look, are you constantly with the headache? I'm not doing any medical stuff here, but backaches and things, you might need to, especially when the doctors say, well, we can't find anything wrong. It may be something going on in your consciousness. So Bhakti Tirtha Swami is giving us every aspect to help us. He states, anger has different ways of manifesting. In many places at this time on the planet, people are not only killing others, but they're even taking their own lives. Anger always has a victim. Both homicide and suicide result from anger in its different expressions. Suicide and depression are sometimes expressions of anger that people have within themselves. Depression often stems from some anxiety, disappointment, or loss that people direct inward. But anger can also manifest externally as a violent physical or verbal attack. That's not news, right? People may even vent their anger against God or the theists who represent a spiritual commission. Some people engage in ecocide and literally destroy the natural resources given by Krishna. This violent behavior is often an expression of anger wrought by people, communities, or nations who have lost control. It often ends in wars and even genocide in which one ethnic group tries to destroy another. Actually, he says, the real war begins within ourselves. The real war begins within ourselves. If we cannot balance our own consciousness, this unsteadiness will surely manifest in our social environment and in the way we perceive the world. By recognizing fear and anger as our enemies, we will have a greater chance to either avoid these enemies or reduce the effectiveness of their attacks. If we cannot fully avoid the enemy, we want to at least find ways to lessen its effect on us, so that we will not turn into casualties or unnecessarily slow down our progress. Just don't forget, we're on a path of higher consciousness. We're on a path to help others, but we can't help others unless we help ourselves first. We want to function with caution, because the enemy's camp can dominate us to such an extent that it can influence all of our interactions. Now, the next section is entitled The Battlefield. Now, he's mentioned war, where real war begins within ourselves. Now, this section is going to talk about the battlefield. Where do you think that is? We've talked about that from the beginning, and we're at Spiritual Warrior. And as warriors, what the battlefield is. Let's see what he says here. In this Spiritual Warrior series, we recognize our consciousness to be the battlefield and our weapons to be genuine knowledge, integrity, compassion, and love. We need these weapons in order to protect ourselves and develop healthy, progressive associations. Otherwise, people's minds will continue to overwhelm them due to the tremendous negative mental culture of the planet. And you can't deny that. It's negative out there. It's negative always. I don't even look at the news anymore. One night a week, Friday night, I'll go to PBS. But other than that, and what I found myself was really being affected when they'd show the places and what's going on. I would be going, oh no. And I realized that wasn't good for my health, so I don't look at it. I don't watch TV. When I turn on my computer, my homepage gives headlines, and I'll choose what headline I want, or other than that, I'll say, okay, I don't want that. And I don't think I'm being in denial. I'm just understanding that this negative energy and what's going on can affect us. He goes on, unless people have stronger devotion or sadhana, they will become casualties. Stronger devotion, sadhana. Some of you can already see how your minds go through amazing shifts from day to day. Just stop sometime and just watch where your mind is going. It's, oh my gosh, I don't want that. And you're the one who has to master that mind. Remember, that's Spiritual Warrior quality number 1. Sometimes, he says, we cannot even find a distinct reason in the environment, but it happens due to lack of proper internal fortification. So this goes back to, I forget which book it was, where we have to be responsible. We must take responsibility for what's going on inside of us and how our minds are reacting towards that. So we have quite a job. Determination, a spiritual warrior. He says, through these discussions, we want to look at ways to openly embrace spiritual life with much more zeal and enthusiasm, which naturally happens as we unfold and really see the depth of some of these issues that he's going to discuss. But see, there he's constantly guiding us for a stronger spiritual life. And that's what these discussions he's giving us. We want to look at ways to openly embrace spiritual life with much more zeal and enthusiasm. And that happens as we unfold and really see the depth of some of these issues. That's why sometimes when I come on, I'll put out questions from what we had heard and I've read the week before, and hopefully you may be making notes or really endeavoring to bring some change. He says most of the reasons that we take shelter of anger are unhealthy. And although we will mainly address the disadvantages of anger, we will also look at the different aspects of healthy and transcendental anger at the end. We want to share these social, psychological, and spiritual aspects of anger in order to help you to become leaders and facilitators. Doesn't that sound exciting? Something to move you and you want to improve on yourself. And here's someone offering to you. So let's see how far we will get this evening, but hopefully you're making some notes and you're recalling and working on this. The next section is entitled, Why Does Anger Develop? Anger basically results from all of the other enemies of the mind. Enemies such as envy, greed, madness, illusion, fear, and especially lust all lead to anger, which sometimes manifests in a very unhealthy way. In the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, now we've read many things from the Bhagavad Gita. I hope you have your copy handy. And again, if you're interested and you don't have a copy, as I've said before, Krishna.com, you can read it online, ebook, Bhagavad Gita. Try reading it if you haven't. Bhagavad Gita as it is, by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. So he's going to quote, the author is going to quote here. The 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord describes the cause of anger in his response to one of Arjuna's questions. He states, Arjuna says, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material modes of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is all devouring sinful enemy of this world. Underlying all of the enemies of the mind, we will find lust or simply misdirected love. Anger also deals with the Rudra principle, which relates to Lord Shiva, a demigod known for his passion and destructive power. We sometimes even refer to it as the Ravana principle, since it relates to a Rakshasa or demonic mentality, which vehemently opposes God and spirituality. Anything that opposes God and a spiritual life or spirituality is definitely demonic. This principle of chaos acts as a source of destruction, annihilation, or disruption. The scriptures explain that Rudra, another name for Lord Shiva, manifests from Lord Brahma's eyebrows as a result of anger. Anger usually involves passion, but at times ignorance overtakes passion at the grossest level. Anger is the product of lust, which develops from the mode of passion. There's a purport from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and I'm going to read it to you. It states, the creation of Rudra from between the eyebrows of Brahma as a result of his anger generated from the mode of passion partly touched by ignorance is very significant. And again it refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, 37. When lust and hankering are unsatisfied, the element of krodha, anger, appears, which is the formidable enemy of the conditioned soul. The most sinful and inimical passion is represented as ahankara, or the false eccentric attitude of thinking oneself to be the all in all. Such an egocentric attitude on the part of the conditioned soul, who is completely under the control of material nature, is described in Bhagavad Gita as foolish. He goes on, this purport shows how those moods of chaos and great passion form a part of the Rudra principle. Passion is the activity responsible for creation, chaos, and destruction. The enemies such as lust, anger, and greed support each other in various coalitions, and sometimes they will attack at the same time in a very vehement and aggressive mood. This occurs when lust and hankering are unsatisfied. When we develop genuine detachment, we do not hanker to that extent. We're now going to look at myths about anger. Let's see what he says. People have many myths about anger that cause them to categorize the issue in a certain way. For instance, some people consider anger to be biological or hereditary. But this myth does not have any solid foundation. Although some people are more prone to anger due to their psychophysical makeup or emission in the modes of passion and ignorance, their socialization or quality of association will have a greater impact on their reactions. Although we do not bring forth other influences into a situation, such as our karma, which affects the ways in which we respond to specific situation, it is a myth that anger is biological and a permanent, unchanging aspect of the body. So don't let anybody hang that on you, you know. Oh, your father used to get, your uncle used to get angry all the time. Yeah, you must have picked that up. The next is called the futility of sense indulgence. It's also a myth that venting our anger will help us deal with it. Some therapists and spiritual systems instruct people to fully express their anger in order to release the feeling. Next to their meditation room, some therapists might have a room in which people can beat punching bags, scream, kick, and cry. If someone has a problem with their husband, wife, or mother-in-law, they might express their anger by beating a pillow that they visualize as the person. Some psychiatrists actually consider this to be a healthy release of anger. He goes on, however, if people could become more whole and spiritual just by acting upon their sense gratification, then we should accept the pig or other similar species as the most evolved, because they do not have any sense of restriction. Actually, the more we feel certain emotions or even addictions, the more we will receive the same negative reactions. The more we act upon our irrational mode of anger, the more we integrate it into our existence. The more a person overeats, oversleeps, or engages in excessive sex, the more he or she will become habituated to such activities. Even in the terms of drugs, the more we take, the more we need to feel the same relief from pain. The expression of anger alone does not cause the relief. Actually, since anger relates extensively to the element of stress, a physical expression may in fact relieve some of the tension, but not always. The stress will usually still remain, and it will come out again in some other situation. Whether we project the anger into the actual person or substitute the anger, it will just reinforce the emotion or cause it to increase. Now this, I think, is important, and I'm going to try to get to these shoulds and blamers because I have to stop at 8 tonight. The next section is called Triggers of Anger. Now, in this section, we want to examine which expressions, thoughts, or actions trigger our anger. This relates to what we will call shoulds and blamers, which all lead to anger. The main problem is that anger leads to more anger and violence leads to more violence. Another person may not see a situation in the same way and may not even understand that they have hurt us. Even if they did consciously try to hurt us, we will not help solve the issue by coming down to their same level. To degrade or dehumanize ourselves in this way will only bring defeat and weakness in spiritual life. And that's important. Our goal as spiritual warriors is to upgrade our spiritual life, improve our spiritual life. And this is what the author Bhakti Tirtha Swami is helping us to. We will allow another person's weakness, says or an author's, to dictate our life, since the past will preoccupy our present and future. It will drain us of our spiritual strength and power. So he gives us 5 shoulds. You got paper and pen? You writing down? Or you got a, what is it, a kind of brain is that you grasp it and you remember. Number 1, since I have a desire, other people should respond to my desire. His comment on that, should. We can easily recognize the inherent problem with this mentality. First of all, other people also have their own desires, which may not always harmonize with our own. In order to rectify this unhealthy tendency, we need to abandon selfishness, value other people more, and become more reflective. Ooh. Okay. Number 2. Quote, since I have a certain idea or standard, other people should also have the same exact one. Sound familiar to anybody out there? This is the commentary. If someone strays from our standard, we may resort to anger. It all depends on our mentality. We often think that others should have the same mentality or code of ethics, even though their situations may differ from our own. 3. Quote, if a problem develops, the other person should change. End quote. If a problem's develop, the other person should change. Remember when we were doing the 4 principles for community? And one of them was, if there's a problem, see it as my fault. If you worked on that one, then you wouldn't fall into this should category. Comment. When problems arise, we sometimes want the other person to change instead of us. If the other person does not change and we why can't I say this word? And we adamantly maintain our mindset. Now you know what I mean. Adamantly, thank you. Maintain our mindset, we will again develop anger. If you maintain that mindset, we need to recognize that their perceptions, karma, or realizations may completely differ from our own. The other person may in fact want to change, but we also need to acknowledge that he or she may not feel a need to change due to their situation. 4. If you love me and care for me, you should do X, Y, and Z. Sound familiar? Listen what he says. This should depends on an assumption. The result that we expect depends on an assumed reality that we have about how the other person thinks, which will automatically dictate their actions. And number 5, since you have hurt me and I feel hurt, I should take revenge. He says, due to some negative interaction in a relationship, one person may want to hurt the other person in return, which is obviously unhealthy. And I'm going to stop there for any questions, comments, because these are powerful, powerful points he's bringing up. And since I feel many of us may hopefully be really looking internally and deeper to deal with anger as it's expressed in our environment, these are something to meditate on for a week. Because when I come back next week, we'll start with these and then go to the blamers. So, are there any comments, questions?
I'm checking now. Still checking now. I'm just checking now.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I just asked.
Oh, anybody there? Anybody out there? Okay.
Oh, maybe there's no.
Managing anger. That's what we've been talking about tonight. Maybe we don't have any angry people or people who have never been angry. No. It's a part of being in this material world. No comments? No questions?
Dr. Kevin says, sure. For me, anger, venom equals mark missing.
Okay. Good realization.
And Son of My Soul says, thank you for this lesson. You have given me much to ponder. Wonderful.
Wonderful. And I had asked some questions in the beginning about excessive anxiety. Did anybody want to comment on any of the questions? Do you remember any definitions of worry or anxiety we presented last week? Or do you remember any points on how to avoid anxiety? Or did you have any experiences where you applied some of those technologies that we talked about for anxiety? No answers to those questions? Okay. Well, I feel we've really covered a lot tonight with something that intrinsic in all of our lives, and we have something to really ponder, as one of the persons said, and to try to work on. And again, this is when we become mindful and aware that spiritual warriors, the battlefield is the consciousness. And if you've heard this class tonight, this seminar on managing anger, just watch yourself every day as much as you can when this emotion comes up or this quality, because that's what this book is about, conquering the enemies of the mind. And as we know, and it's said here, the mind will bring it up and then you go into. So try to be more mindful and see and go deep and go within. Don't be afraid to go inside yourself and maybe do some writing when you see or you know you have some experience with anger. Why is it How did it come about? Remember, with the anxiety, there's questions to ask. What is the problem? Remember, you can do that with this also. And that can help us. What was it? He says there's 4 questions you ask. What is the actual problem? What is the cause of the problem? What are the possible solutions? And what is the best solution that we can try to attain? And you can do that when you're going into excessive anxiety, and now you can also use them to check out what's causing or bringing, how to manage anger. All right, I thank you all for being there, and I hope we will meet again next week. Have a wonderful week. Hare Krishna. God bless you all.